Hello and welcome back to my second live stream of the night. I'm a wreck. I was having a frustrating moment doing Uber because it was not providing the income that is necessary to live. So, to put it lightly, and yeah, I decided that I went on there. I exposed myself. No, I got to express some of my deepest, darkest fears. And I am now reading a book. There's a part two. There's several parts. Today we're gonna go and read the second part. Trying to be as vague as possible because this is somewhat illegal. Part two. Let's get started. Fear and faith. A writer once asked to help her explore some unpleasant emotions that were reoccurring in her life. I started by asking her to write a short story about her childhood. When she presented it to me the following week, I was struck by the first line. This is the story of how I learned to be fearful and what I learned to be fearful of. The story of her childhood was a story about fear. This is scary. I can't read this, you guys. As a child of an alcoholic who later became an alcoholic herself, fear was a constant theme in her life. I'm afraid to let anyone know me or see me or be close to me, she wrote. Just as with pain, fear is something we all experience. As human beings, we naturally fear hunger, want illness and injury. We fear hunger, want, illness, and injury. On an emotional level, we are frightened of abandonment, criticism, intimacy, and pain. We also fear economic hardship, social disrepute, and we are all afraid of the time when sickness or death will come to us or to our loved ones. When fear arises, we often harden our bodies and hearts, closing inward to protect ourselves. Sometimes we feel tense, paralyzed, unable to move. At other times, we may race around faster, trying to make ourselves into a moving target, something harder to hit. We build up walls and barriers, call up armies, and pay insurance companies, doctors, and governments to protect us from danger as we try to minimize the risk of being human. When we live in fear of everything that may bring us harm, we effectively insulate ourselves from life itself. Because pain, sorrow, illness, and death are unavoidable ingredients in life. Despite our fearful preparations, many things that frighten us will inevitably touch us at some moment in some way. In addition to the genetic fears that accompany being human, we also experience other fears, terrifying fears that we inherit from our childhood, those painful memories that refuse to fade away. The writer's story continued. The thing I was most fearful of was what my mother's mood might be on any given day. I was afraid of being punished for things. I was afraid to be caught at almost anything depending on the day or time of day. the betrayal, the lies, the abuse, the fighting, the desertion. We remember each moment in vivid detail. The tender heart of the small child is like a page on which each transgression is indelibly stamped. For the child who has been hurt, fear is not simply a vague concern about the possibility of harm. It becomes a reflexive response to the certainty of danger. When Zinnia was young, her father would come home late after the bars were closed, bellowing and cursing through the house in the dark of the night until he eventually made it to the bed, sometimes later. From the moment her father walked in the door, she would lie awake, gripping the sides of her bed, staring at the door, paralyzed with fear that he would burst into her room. Only after he finally collapsed would she relax enough to be able to sleep. As an adult, when Zinnia goes to bed, she still feels the familiar anxiety she felt as a child. This woman, now in her 40s, carries this old fear born in childhood, smallness, relentless and unceasing, that continues to disturb both her sleep and her waking. Children raised in family confusion or uncertainty come to experience deep and lasting fears that lodge in the body and heart. There is a perpetual sense of imminent danger that saturates every moment. No single instant is truly fearless. Even the most loving or playful setting seems to hold some unseen promise of danger. Harry Potter, please. Fear can have many faces. Nancy, sexually abused by an uncle who eventually committed suicide, remembered driving in a car with him when she was small, terrified he would make a move toward her. She kept her hand on the handle of the passenger door, ready to jump out. She said she still feels as if she has her hand on the escape lever for most of her life. Richard, who was molested by his mother, told me that when women try to get close to him, he feels paralyzed with terror. This fear, he said, had ruined his marriage. Carla's mother was a manic depressive, would have terrible personality shifts. One moment she was a kind and loving mother, and in the next instant she would be yelling, screaming, and pulling out her daughter's hair with no warning. What was safe and warm became frightening and dangerous. As an adult, Carla carried enormous tension in her body constantly. Protecting herself from the inevitable onslaughts that would come from an unpredictable world. As we grow older, why do we still hold so tightly to what terrified us as children? Because the wounds were deep and powerful and came when we were tender and vulnerable. When we were small, we had to rely on powers greater than ourselves for our every need, for our food, clothing, shelter, warmth, and safety. Our very lives were absolutely dependent upon these larger beings for all of our care. So when mom ran out of the house, or dad passed out, or someone was beat up, or someone got divorced, or died, or went away and never came back, it felt as if our very lives were in danger. We were literally frightened for our survival. Our childhood fears were compounded because the people who claimed to be the guardians of our safety were inevitably the same who caused us hurt. The father who said he would always be there for us was the same father who went away and left us. The mother who said she would never let anyone or anything hurt us was the same mom who yelled and screamed at us. So just as we learned to be afraid, we also came to believe that no one could be trusted to give us shelter. Some of us attempted to minimize the danger by trying to take total control of our environment. Perhaps if we could stop our parents from fighting or drinking or help them get along better or make sure the dinner was ready on time, the napkins were folded and the toast didn't burn, then things would be all right. Then we could ward off any potential flare-ups. Once we got all the ducks in a row, once we were firmly in control of all the things that could possibly go wrong in our family, then we would be safe, exhausted, but safe. Exhausted. Unfortunately, the existence of pain and sorrow in our family was totally beyond our control. Our parents' suffering, confusion, anger, or grief was deeply woven into our common family story, and there was little or nothing we could have done to prevent its taking shape in our lives. Their pain could erupt in clumsiness, anger, or desertion at any time, and regardless of how many ducks we managed to coax into a neat, protective row, there would always be that one we missed, and the drama would begin again. There was nothing that any child could do to stop it. Christy, troubled by a pervasive insecurity for most of her life, asked me to help her discover some sense of safety, some experience of sanctuary. We began by exploring a few of the childhood fears that arose in her very troubled family, and then I suggested we do a guided meditation. After helping her relax into a meditative state, I invited her to allow an image of safety to emerge, an image of a place where she felt absolutely, completely safe, and then to rest for a few moments in the comfort of that image. When the meditation was finished, I asked Christy to describe her image of safety. It was wonderful, she said. I was dead and in outer space. We both laughed at how far she had to go to feel any sense of security. This powerful sense of danger had permeated the cells of her body so deeply that she could only imagine herself safe when she was dead in outer space. Clearly, fear had become one of the strongest voices in the course of her psyche. The cost of fear. Thank you. This is my book nook. The cost of fear. Our fear made us powerless. Our fears made us feel powerless and vulnerable, and so we desperately constructed any strategies we could to protect ourselves. If we thought that our true feelings would be disruptive, we learned to conceal them. If someone seemed angry or displeased with us, we would instantly disown ourselves and pretend to be whatever they wanted us to be. We could even pretend to love when loving was required. Um, okay. We could even pretend to love when loving was required. Out of fear and desperation, we learned to cultivate an emotional and spiritual dishonesty to protect ourselves from harm. Fear became a primary motivator for much of our behavior. For some of us, we became our most familiar and reliable feeling. It became our most familiar and reliable feeling. But this kind of fear gradually and unquestionably corrodes our lives. Corrodes our lives. Dr. Herbert Benson, professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School and author of the relaxation response, explored the fight or flight response that existed in humans as well as in animals. When we experience fear, our body produces specific changes in pulse, respiration, and secretion of certain hormones. Our body prepares to defend itself or to flee. This can prove to be a useful biological response to real danger, as when we are physically attacked or must act quickly to save a drowning child. But Benson notes that many of us regularly maintain inordinately high levels of fear and stress in our lives, even when we are in no real danger at all. Our chronic psychological fears that linger from childhood produce tremendous levels of stress that invite all manner of illness and disease into our bodies. When we live our lives in fear, regardless of whether those fears are real or imagined, we lower our resistance to disease and actually help bring about those illnesses we fear the most. In addition, our culture effectively replicates our childhood worries about fear and safety. We live in a dangerous society that places a tremendous premium on protecting ourselves from harm. In 1 year, Americans spent more than 50 billion on security equipment to protect their homes and property. As a nation, we spend more than 300 billion a year on nuclear weapons, tanks, guns, and soldiers to protect ourselves from everyone else on the planet. We spend countless billions on health and life insurance to shield us from the cost of illness and death. And with all of these expenditures, thousands of dollars for every man, woman, and child in the United States, hardly anyone feels truly safe. We still listen for the things that go bump in the night. Where there's fear, said Mohandas Gandhi, we lose the way of our spirit. When we are in fear, we focus all our attention on the point of danger and lose our capacity to find any courage, security, or peace within ourselves. We become so obsessed with what threatens us that the inner strengths of the heart become inaudible. Perhaps this is why we become so obsessed with what threatens us that the inner strengths of the heart become inaudible. Perhaps this is why In the Christian New Testament, the phrase "be not afraid" is found more than 300 times. When we are afraid, we lose our ability to feel our own inner strength, and things precious and vital within us are smothered by our anxieties. When we spend all our days worried about how things will turn out, planning for whether we will have enough food, clothing, money, or love, then what kind of life have we protected? In spite of our plans and strategies, we never feel at peace. The perpetuation of danger. In the 1950s, some Japanese soldiers were found on remote islands in the Pacific. Still fighting the Second World War, which had actually ended years before. It was very hard to convince these poor hangers-on that the war was really over and it was safe to go home. How do we know when the war's over? How do we know when to protect ourselves from danger and when to allow ourselves to feel safe? Children raised in troubled families are uncertain which fears are justified. Like the fear of rape or of nuclear war, and which are simply habitual ghosts from our childhood, phantom fears without any real substance. The fears of childhood cast such long shadows across the psyche that after a time almost anything can generate a fearful response. We even learn to wait for trouble to arrive. The fight, the angry word, the slamming door. It is almost a relief when it comes, so certain is its coming. All of our intuitive wisdom and emotional sensitivity is designed to protect when the axe will fall, so that we may do what we do best, try to protect ourselves from hurt. The problem is this: skills learned in danger require the presence of danger to be effective. If our greatest skill is getting ourselves out of trouble, then we are at our best when we have discovered some trouble to get out of. In a strange way, we feel safer in fear and danger than we do in tranquility, because we know how to survive danger. We have no idea how to manage peace. For many of the young men who fought in Vietnam, the truest thing that ever happened to them was war, booby traps, and death in the night. Those that made it back had learned to survive situations of tremendous danger and great terror. When they returned home, many of these young men found it difficult to adjust themselves to normal American life. Their skills were applicable only in the murderous jungles of southern Asia. Many gradually came to recreate for themselves lives of reckless danger, seeking familiar ground on which to battle the enemies they knew best. Others carried deep within them many debilitating fears that terrorized their inner lives. Others carried deep within them many debilitating fears that terrorize their inner lives. How can we be sure that our fears and terrors are not telling us the truth? that we should not be on our guard at every turn, and how can we know when it is safe enough to allow some of our fears to fall away and risk the vulnerability of being human? Fear within danger. When we are raised in familiar or in family distress, we learn to fear many things. We fear that things will change or go wrong. We worry about what others will think of us, and we fear the hurt that comes from verbal or physical abuse. We fear abandonment and rejection. We even worry about ourselves, afraid that what we have inside may not be enough, may not measure up to the task of living. We fear that our gifts, our intuition, even our spirits are tragically deficient. That was me last stream. Consequently, as we grow older, whatever we feel afraid, we naturally presume that we are afraid of something. We assume that there is some person, circumstance, defect, or event that genuinely threatens our well being. As soon as we feel frightened, we usually try to identify a particular danger to justify our fear. If no threat is immediately apparent, we may even manufacture one to give our fears credibility. Those of us who experience fear as children habitually tie our fears to some memory of the past. When fear arises, we instantly seek a childhood explanation. I am afraid because my father used to beat me up, or I am frightened because my mother never protected me. In our rush to calm our fear, we frequently look first to our childhood to explain and justify our anxiety. But now we are no longer small and vulnerable, and when we feel afraid, it does not necessarily indicate that we are, in fact, in real danger. It may simply be a response to a misperception of danger. There may be no danger at all. Our anxiety may simply be a signal that something in this moment is in need of attention. Something in our body, our emotions, or our environment may be somehow disrupted or off balance and needs our care. Perhaps in these moments, our fear is merely asking us to pay attention, indicating a need to watch for something happening that we are not watching closely enough. Fear may arise for any number of reasons. Perhaps we are simply tired or feeling fragile that day, or maybe we are preoccupied or require loving care or need to attend to some feeling we have been pushing away. There may be no real external danger at all, just a sensation of anxiety arising within us. Jack Kornfield says the presence of fear may even be a sign of growth, a moment in which we are about to open to something bigger than the world we usually experience. As children, we fear what can harm us, but as adults, fear may often arise when we unexpectedly encounter those things that would heal us. The story is told that when Jesus was born in a small country town, there were shepherds nearby keeping watch over their flocks. In the dark of the night, an angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were filled with fear. And the angel said to them, "Be not afraid." When the shepherds meet with something they had never seen before, even though it was a miraculous moment filled with light, announcing the birth of the Christ child. Still, they were afraid, but just because they were afraid, it did not mean they were in danger. They were terrified merely because they encountered something outside their experience. They had inadvertently bumped into God. If fear then is not always an indicator of danger, what can we do when fear arises? How, in the face of our anxiety, fear, and terror, do we cultivate a sense of safety, a sense of faith that will be all will be well, a place of sanctuary in which we may rest? Fear and faith. Since we are rarely in mortal danger, we may discover that most of our fears are generated by the mind. Most of us are fortunate to have enough to eat, enough clothes to keep us warm, and a place to sleep at night. Even though we are reasonably safe and cared for, we still go about our lives with fear and trembling. Why? Not because we fear the present, but because we fear the future. We almost always seem to handle what we are given in this moment, but we expect that someday we will be given more than we can handle, and we are terrified that it will be more than we can bear. We have seen how the pain of our past can give birth to bitterness, anger, and grief. Just as grief arises in response to pain in the past, fear is our response to pain in the future. Thus, if we are to understand our fears and learn to heal what frightens us, we must first explore how we react to the anticipation of fear. Fear arises when we believe we will not be strong enough to handle the pain we will be given. As children in troubled families, we were given so much hurt, and we felt so small and fragile. We learned powerful lessons about the kinds of deep pain that could tear at the heart and body. We felt how much it could hurt when we were rejected by our own parents, when we were yelled at or hit or simply forgotten. There were times we weren't sure we could take any more pain, and that if it ever got worse, we might just give up. We didn't know if we could trust ourselves to survive the emotional and physical batterings that came from being a child, from being a member of our family. As adults, we still carry much of that uncertainty within ourselves. We are not yet convinced we can withstand all this discomforts, losses, and torments in store for us in this lifetime. At times, we don't feel strong enough to be human, to be big, to be a grown up. Even now, we still feel little. We don't trust ourselves. Let's read that again. As adults, we still carry much of that uncertainty within ourselves. We are not yet convinced we can withstand all the discomforts, losses, and torments in store for us in this lifetime. At times we don't feel strong enough to be human, to be big, to be a grown up. Even now, we still feel little. We don't trust ourselves or have faith in our ability to hold our own against the sufferings and sorrows the world can bring. When we are uncertain and tentative about our ability to handle the pain of being human, we become worried and afraid. When we feel fragile or weak, when we are convinced that the next loss, rejection, or failure will be the one that will somehow be used. Do 1 second. When we are convinced that the next loss, rejection, or failure will be the one that will somehow do us in or break us apart, then we will approach each day of our lives with tremendous anxiety. In the Christian scriptures, there is a story about Jesus and his disciples as they were crossing the Sea of Galilee in a small boat. Suddenly, without warning, a great storm rose up. The winds tossed the boat to and fro, and the boat began to fill with water. The disciples were overcome with fear, yet Jesus, in the stern of the boat, remained asleep. The disciples, terrified for their lives, woke Jesus and screamed, "Master, don't you care if we perish?" Jesus turned to the ones who were with him and said, "Why are you afraid? Have you no faith?" In the middle of great danger, Jesus was at peace. The disciples could not rest until the danger had been extinguished, while Jesus' sense of safety rested in a deep faith that all would be well. While Jesus' sense of safety rested in deep faith that all would be well, even in the midst of a life-threatening storm. What do we mean when we use the word faith? For many of us, the word can be awkward. It may be uncomfortable to hear or understand, even more difficult to use because for certain centuries it has been interpreted by certain religious traditions as a litmus test for spiritual worthiness. A specific quantity of faith in these traditions has been used as an entrance requirement for the kingdom of God. If you have enough faith, then you get into heaven, you become a child of God, and you will be granted whatever you desire. If you pray hard enough, if you have faith in God and the doctrines of the church, if you affirm your faith in these teachings, then you will be worthy, you will be cared for, and God will look favorably on your life. Let's read that again. I was zoned out. If you have enough faith, then you get into heaven, you become a child of God, and you will be granted whatever you desire. If you pray hard enough, if you have faith in God and the doctrines of the church, if you affirm your faith in those teachings, then you will be worthy, you will be cared for, and God will look favorably on your life. This antiquated definition of faith taught that if we had enough of it, we could change the world around us to make it more of our liking. With enough faith, we could conquer our fears simply by making those things that frightened us miraculously disappear. If we were poor, faith could bring us more money. If we were sick, faith could make us well. If we were alone, faith could give us company. If we were feeling inadequate, our faith could bring us a successful career. An adequate supply of faith would assure us that all would turn out the way we hoped. All too often, however, the zealous application of this religious maxim has been used to drive a wedge between the faithful and the unfaithful, as a way to tell the good people from the bad ones. Many people have been deeply hurt by those who felt a moral obligation to judge the spiritual worthiness of others by taking a measure of their faith. This has been especially abusive when applied to people who are poor, hungry, culturally or sexually different, or terminally ill with cancer or AIDS. Too often, the religious assertion is made that if these unfortunate people only had enough faith, then God would feed them, clothe them, and heal them of their deviance, their cancer or their AIDS. If the AIDS or cancer didn't go away, then the fault must be with victim. They must surely be lacking in faith. Thus many of us have felt faith used as a weapon against us, as we have been judged relentlessly and without mercy, and experienced not unlike the pain we felt in our childhood families. How can we reclaim the word faith so that we may use it for our own healing? We may begin by noting that in most ancient scriptural texts, the word faith is not a noun, it is a verb. Faith is not something that one person has and another doesn't. Faith is not a thing and so cannot be measured or possessed. Faith is a way of being. It is a spiritual practice, a way of discovering what is reliable and true, a way of expanding trust in our inner wisdom. It is a place inside where we are in a compassionate relationship with what is strong and whole within ourselves. Where we listen to the still small voices of our heart and soul. When we are practicing a path of faith, we are in intimate conversation with what is deepest in our mind, heart, and spirit. For the Hebrews, faith involved a deep trust in the watchful love of God for all God's children, according to the prophet Isaiah, even in the midst of the most terrible circumstances. Those whose hearts are centered in the faithful care of God shall renew their strength. They shall mount up on wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not be faint. The Buddhist word for faith, Shraddha, also suggests much more than a belief in theological doctrine. Shraddha implies a sense of trust, clarity, and confidence. It literally means to put one's heart on. It is etymologically akin to the Latin cor, from which we derive the words heart and courage. Thus, the practice of faith is clearly the practice of a strong and courageous heart. If you set your heart aright, says the book of Job, you will lie down and none will make you afraid. Another Buddhist teaching about faith is found in the concept of equanimity. Equanimity is the ability to experience the changes in our lives, circumstances, and feelings and still remain calm, centered, and unmoved. The image most often used to illustrate the quality of equanimity is that of a mountain. The mountain sits there as the sun shines on it, the rain drenches it, it is covered with snow and struck by lightning. Through all the changing conditions, the mountain remains unwavering. As we cultivate equanimity within ourselves, we learn to be more like the mountain, finding that place of strength and courage within ourselves that enable us to withstand the strings and arrows of being human without feeling overwhelmed by fear. As we explore the practices of faith, Shraddha, and equanimity, one thing becomes clear. Genuine faith is born of the ability to trust in what is most fundamentally true within ourselves. Circumstances will change, and all manner of things, pleasant and unpleasant, will arise and fall away. Sometimes our lives will be touched with joy, and at other times we will be given tremendous pain and sorrow. Many times we will be afraid, but the object of faith is not to eliminate difficult circumstances, nor is faith about trusting in a God who will rescue us from hurt, or who, if only we believe strongly enough, will make everything better. The real question of faith is when pain and loss inevitably come our way. Do we withdraw in fear that we will be destroyed, or do we deepen our trust in our innate capacity to endure them? Can we find a strong and courageous heart, a place of clarity and wholeness within ourselves in which we can place our ultimate trust, gently allowing both the fear and the pain to simply move through us? Faith is a centering response. The search for faith is a search for our true nature, for the spirit within, divine strength that lives in our deepest heart. When we were small, we sought safety in trying to control the dangers that populated our daily lives. We kept waiting until everything was okay, until everyone was finally asleep, until the fighting was over. But as we grow older, we discover that the hazards and discomforts that threaten us never totally disappeared from our lives. We begin to see that true safety is not the absence of danger, but rather the presence of something else, the presence of a sense of faith, born in the heart and sustained by a spirit of serenity, trust, and courage. If we seek our safety within ourselves and not in the manipulation of environment and circumstances, then our practice becomes a pilgrimage to uncover a deep and abiding faith in our own gifts, our own strengths, and our own spirit. Thanks for the crosses. Cute. Yeah, I'm in a van. Approaching our fears. If faith reflects a confidence in our own inner strength, then as we cultivate faith, we become more able to accept whatever we are given, regardless of whether we are given pleasure or pain, sorrow or delight. We gradually come to feel confident that we are strong, resilient, and creative enough to survive and endure the perils of being human. Our first challenge, then, is to learn to approach our fears directly. Often, our first response to fear is to feel our own fragility, and so we move away and hide. We make ourselves invisible and inaccessible to whatever might bring us harm, thereby exaggerating the experience of fear. When we run from circumstances that feel dangerous, we generate additional fear and anxiety. Have we run far enough? Can they still see us? Have we thought of everything? Are we secure yet? We still seek to find safety by eliminating external danger rather than relying on our own inner resources for sanctuary and protection. We may discover that we usually feel safer when we move toward those things that frighten us, not when we move away. Daniel was a man who, as a young boy, was molested by his mother. As an adult, he had always found it difficult to sustain lasting relationships with women. There would inevitably come a moment when it felt to him that they were getting too close, and he would feel afraid. At that point, he would feel a need to run away and would often end the relationship. During a therapy group, Dan announced that he had begun a relationship with a woman he cared for, so he wanted to work on his problem with fear. He said the woman was extremely kind and understanding, and he felt very much loved. At the same time, he was already beginning to feel an impulse to run, to hide, to get out. How could he protect himself and be safe, yet still remain close and open to her? I asked him to pick a woman from the group to role play the woman he cared for. Then I placed them several feet apart and asked Dan how he felt. I feel okay, a little frightened, but basically fine. I asked him to move closer, about 3 feet away. How did he feel? Still okay, but I feel more tightness in my stomach. It's a little scarier. I asked him to move 2 feet from her. This is much scarier, he said. I feel very uncomfortable. I start to go numb. I want to disappear, run away. I kept asking him to move closer until they were face to face, maybe 18 inches apart. I feel really bad. I want to just run away, just go away somewhere else. I feel numb. My stomach feels nauseous. I'm frightened. At this point, his body was visibly shaken, and I could see he wished this exercise to be over so he could return to his chair and forget the whole thing. Move a bit closer, I asked, and also requested the woman to place her hand on his. At this point, their bodies were almost touching, and Dan was ready to bolt. Yet, after a moment in this position, something shifted. Slowly, everyone in the group saw him relax, and he seemed much more comfortable, even allowing a half smile to merge. This feels better, he admitted. This close, where I can see her eyes. And with her hand on mine, I feel okay. I'm not thinking about her. I'm just being with her. Somehow, this feels safer. Daniel had spent his whole life running from what frightened him. Because of his early sexual abuse and unpredictability of intimacy had caused so much fear to rise in his body that he would always run away. But every time he ran away, he would generate so many worries and anxious fantasies that he would inevitably create even more fear in himself for the next time. It had never occurred to him that moving closer, moving toward her rather than away from her, could bring a sense of safety. As he moved closer, he could see in her eyes something that brought comfort and serenity. He could see her own fear, her deep caring for him, her own uncertainty, and her own willingness to be human and vulnerable. By changing his relationship to what frightened him, he discovered a deeper sense of faith in himself, a sense that he could handle whatever was to come. When we grow up small and afraid, we come to believe that true sanctuary and serenity can only come when we develop foolproof mechanisms for shutting out danger, for hiding, for running away, for not being open to what could hurt us. Yet, as we move closer to our fears, as we accept them, explore them, and examine our response to the anticipation of danger, we may begin to discover that we have within ourselves all that is required to feel protected and safe. When we directly face what frightens us, we often discover our own capacity to survive. Whatever we have been given, the more we are present with ourselves in fear without withdrawing, hiding out, or armoring ourselves, the more trust we develop our own resources, our own creativity, resilience, and wisdom. Slowly, we begin to cultivate a much deeper faith that despite the hurts and disappointments we are given somehow within ourselves, all will be well. Faith in ourselves. Unfortunately, many of us as children even learn to mistrust ourselves. If our families rarely talked about their feelings, we learn to mistrust the reliability of our own emotions. If our parents were uncomfortable and unwilling to speak the truth, we began to mistrust our own perceptions of what was true, and if we constantly felt we were in danger of being hurt, we learned to mistrust our ability to protect ourselves. Even as we grow older, whatever we felt afraid, we would immediately focus our attention. Whenever we felt afraid, we would immediately focus our attention on our weakness and vulnerability. Acute acutely aware of the disparity between the powerful threat of the danger without and the fragile, vulnerable, untrustworthy person within. However, the truth is that often we are much stronger than we imagine. Curiously, few of us realize how much strength it took simply to grow up in our families. As children, we drew upon tremendous determination, spirit, and courage as we strove to maintain our daily lives, to survive the repeated injuries, and to protect ourselves from danger. We developed a remarkable intuition that could warn us of any imbalances or irregularities within ourselves or others. We became attentive and aware of subtle shifts in loyalty, strategy, or intent in those around us, and we became adept at redefining our survival strategies at a moment's notice. In addition, in response to the emotional uncertainties of our families, many of us managed to uncover a place of refuge deep within ourselves where we inevitably found some source of strength and comfort, even in the midst of an environment without sufficient nourishment, support, or care. For many of us, this exceedingly private place of inner fortitude has actually been our closest and most trustworthy ally. For much of our lives, yet it is a place to which we go with remarkable infrequency. It is a place that others are rarely privileged to see. Only when we are terribly hurt, frightened, or unseen about our lives do we go deeply inward to that place. Unsure about our lives do we go deeply inward to that place. It is a place to which we go when all feels lost, when our strategies and manipulations have finally failed and the world has become unmanageable. Then, in despair, we turn inside in search of our deepest strength. Unfortunately, many of us must be devastated by some tragic moment before we will reluctantly place our trust in what is deepest within ourselves. Many of us never imagine the depth of our inner strength until we find ourselves confronting a terminal illness, experiencing a divorce, or suffering the loss of a spouse, a friend, or a child. Face to face with tragedy, illness, or death, many of us actually become less fearful, not because life holds any less danger, but because in those moments we are propelled deep into ourselves, reaching to uncover what is strong, reliable, and whole. Thanks. It's a long read. Within our hearts and spirits, even in the midst of a personal hell, we rediscover within ourselves a heart of courage. Not long ago, Bob, a recovering alcoholic and a dear friend, telephoned me. He had spent a good deal of his life accomplishing great things, accumulating wealth, and cultivating positions of power. Yet in the midst of it all, he was always afraid he wasn't quite good enough, and he somehow had to prove his worthiness through his accomplishments. He was always working to calm his inner fears and anxieties, and rarely felt strong or peaceful inside. Bob's son had died of AIDS just 2 years before, so both he and his wife had been working with death for some time. Their courageous ability to use their suffering as a teaching for others had helped them become less fearful about their own lives, and they were quite beloved in the community as people to whom everyone could come with their pain and always feel welcome. One morning, Bob called to tell me he had diagnosed as having terminal cancer, and the doctors said he had only months to live. All my life, he told me, I have prayed for inner strength and serenity. I have gone to workshops, read books, and asked God every day to give me a sense of centeredness and peace. But now I know I might die very soon. I don't feel afraid at all. It's strong, but I feel so calm after living with our son's death and being so close to my own. Something in me finally feels peaceful. I certainly don't want to die, but I'm afraid to go if this is my time. But I'm ready to go if this is my time. This close to death, I have a strong feeling of faith that somehow, whatever happens, it will be all right. Just what I've wanted my whole life. Perhaps the greatest fear is the fear of our own death. Yet many of us have witnessed those who, as they suffered the consequences of cancer, heart disease, AIDS, or other life-threatening illnesses, actually became more peaceful and serene as the moment of their death drew closer. The nearer they came to the actual moment of death, the less frightened they became. Somehow, in proximity to their greatest fear, a corresponding awareness of tremendous courage emerged within them. This seems to be a potent, reliable equation that as we wholeheartedly approach what frightens us, a parallel reservoir of strength arises to meet it, and we are no longer eclipsed by our fear. It is not fear alone that makes us seek this place so much as a willingness to confront our fears directly, thereby opening up within us the full potential of a courageous heart. Here we go deep within ourselves to rediscover that place of faith, of Shraddha, to feel the comfort and power of our own spirit, our true nature that, even in the face of death, emerges as a trustworthy and reliable ally. How many of us have lost this place of faith? How many of us have... Let me read this again. This seems to be a potent, reliable equation that as we wholeheartedly approach what frightens us, a parallel reservoir of strength arises to meet it, and we are no longer eclipsed by our fear. It is not fear alone that makes us seek this place so much as a willingness to confront our fears directly, thereby opening up within us the full potential of a courageous heart. Here we go deep within ourselves to rediscover that place of faith, of Shraddha, to feel the comfort and power of our own spirit. our true nature that even in the face of death emerges as a trustworthy and reliable ally. So many of us have lost this place of faith. How many of us have lost this place of faith? How many of us have misplaced this trust in ourselves, this conviction and confidence in our own inner strength? In reality, we never lose that inner place of strength, but in fear of danger, we desperately place our trust instead in our external strategies to diffuse and neutralize the perils of the world, relying on our complex psychological manipulations, trying to reconstruct a world without pain or peril. We tend to ignore the persistent fact of our own inner strength. Our childhoods taught us many things about ourselves and compelled us to cultivate a variety of skills in perception, resi- resilience, and creativity, endurance, and determination, all of which remain at our disposal if we will only use them. Growing up in our families, many of us learn to understand things that no one else ever spoke about. To notice what no one else claimed to see, to consult with ourselves in solitude, and to nourish and nurture ourselves when we were hurt, forgotten, or ignored. This quiet, intimate place of hidden strength is the place where God lives within us, where what is eternal and trustworthy has been our private ally and companion. When we live our lives by acting out of this deep place of knowing, when we listen to the voices that speak to us from inner place of sanctuary, then we may truly begin the practice of faith. The Baba taught his followers to be to be lamps unto ourselves, be your own confidence, hold to the truth within yourselves. Are we willing to trust this place within us? Are we willing to place our confidence in the wisdom of our own heart and spirit? What if every time we felt frightened or confused, we trusted our intuition? Most of us, because we mistrust ourselves, habitually second guess ourselves and perceptions. But what if we trusted ourselves, our gifts, or our inner voice? What if we assumed our feelings were accurate and were telling us something important about ourselves and the world? What if we trusted our hearts, relying on our ability to receive sensitive information from those around us and acted as if what we felt were true? How much more courageous we would be if we felt that all of the perceptions of our mind, heart, and spirit were intact, fully functional, and working perfectly on our behalf. The following is an exercise that many people have used with much success. I ask them to try this behavior for a single day. Resolve to go through an entire day assuming that you are trustworthy, that all your feelings are accurate, that all your perceptions and intuitions are reliable. As you approach each person or situation, ask yourself the question, if I knew that I was absolutely trustworthy, how would I handle this moment? What would I do? What could I say that would be true? What would be the right action to settle this situation with safety and clarity? Once we begin to imagine that we have all we need to answer the question of life within ourselves, it is amazing how quickly our habitual fears begin to melt away. Faith, acceptance, and serenity. Throughout our lives, our jobs will change, our bodies will grow old, people will come and go, and we will have success and failure, health and disease. Nothing will belong to us. Nothing will stay, nothing will remain the same. And yet, in the midst of it all, still we breathe, our hearts beat, our days go from morning until night, and we remain present and alive with the equanimity of the mountain. The courageous heart feels it all, yet remains faithful and assured that within ourselves all will be well. There is a Zen story about a certain general who, during a civil war, led his troops through the countryside, overrunning everything and everyone in his path. The people of one town, having heard the tales of his cruelty, were terrified when they heard he was coming in the direction of their village, and they all fled into the mountains. The general marched into the empty town and sent his troops to search for any who remained. Some of the soldiers came back and reported that only one person remained, a Zen priest. The general strode over to the temple, walked in, pulled his sword, and said, "Don't you know who I am? I am the one who can run through you without batting an eye." The Zen master looked back and calmly responded, and I, sir, am one who can be run through without batting an eye." Hearing this, the general bowed and left. Faith is not fortress against danger. Faith unfolds like a lotus flower resting deep within us, a quiet place of deep trust. It is not a magic formula that prevents suffering. It is a place of strength where we feel most vitally present in heart and spirit. As children of family pain, we learn to withstand the changing events and circumstances that punctuated our lives as adults. We may rediscover the same inner strength and use it to cultivate faith in our spirit, our true nature, and our deep inner wisdom. As we become more centered in what is deepest in ourselves, we slowly uncover a place of serenity where even the memory of a drunken father or an angry mother cannot disturb the waters of our soul. This is a very difficult place for many of us to find, and even more difficult to sustain. We may cultivate our sense of faith through a daily practice of prayer or meditation where we constantly revisit that place within us that is strong enough even to hold what frightens us and to endure the sorrows of being human. Thomas Merton, the monk, poet, and spiritual scholar, said that through prayer and meditation we may find sanctuary in those fearful moments when sanctuary seems impossible. In dialogue with these voices of our heart and spirit, we take refuge in the Buddha, in the heart of Jesus, in what we call the God within us. And through practice, we learn to place our faith and trust in those inner voices of clarity, strength, and wholeness. Finally, we may even discover that our sense of humor, our ability to laugh at ourselves and our fears, can help us invoke a playful sense of faith that despite the slings and arrows of life, somehow all will be well. Sally came to see me because she had been terribly frightened of many things in her life and wanted to learn how to feel more secure and self-assured. We spent many hours exploring the wounds of her childhood. We explored the afflictions she suffered at the hands of her parents. We did several guided meditations, colleagues, and journals. In short, everything we could think of to help her feel protected. Yet despite our best efforts, she still felt very much afraid. Then one day Sally came bouncing into my office with a big grin on her face and brought raspberry colored high top sneakers on her feet. I bought these yesterday and put them on because I thought wearing raspberry sneakers would definitely protect me from now on. I am going to wear raspberry sneakers every day for safety. We laughed together, enjoying the freedom that came when she allowed her playfulness and courage to melt away some of the fears that had locked up her heart. Rumi, the Sufi poet, speaks of the moment when we meet our fears with deep faith, playfulness, and love. Today, like every other day, we wake up empty and frightened. Don't open the door to the study and begin Don't open the door to the study and begin reading. Take down this dull claimer. Let the beauty we love be what we do. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. Okay, that was part 2 of I Can't Read This. Did you like it? Ah! Okay. Good. Good you liked it. Thanks for listening. Tomorrow's is exercise and meditation. So stay tuned. See you later.